We're going to look now at a process for healing our relationship, for keeping the drain clear or unblocking it if there's a backlog of unresolved hurt.
The process isn't complicated, but it can be challenging. And as a hedgehog myself, my instinct is to keep the lid on and not address the issue. But I've come to realize that isn't any good. We have to address the underlying hurts. Otherwise, they build up, and it's like the drain getting blocked.
The process has 3 parts. First, we need to talk about the hurt. In the Bible, Jesus tells us very practically what we're to do if we're aware of having hurt or offended our partner. To paraphrase the Bible in Matthew chapter 5, he says, "If you suddenly remember a grudge your partner has against you, leave immediately, go to your partner and make things right." And then a little further on, Jesus tells us what to do if we've been hurt. He says, if your partner offends you, go and tell them, work it out between the two of you. So in both situations, whether we're aware that we've hurt our partner or have been hurt, we need to take the initiative to bring it out into the open so that things can get healed. When we're both taking the initiative, rather than waiting for the other one to make the first move, things can get sorted out amazingly quickly. However, we recognize that it may not be easy. It could be that we don't like confrontation and we want to keep the peace at all costs. Or perhaps we're afraid of making ourselves vulnerable by opening up to our partner and telling them we're hurt. Or it could be our pride or our shame that stops us admitting we were wrong. Or we're afraid of our partner's reaction.
Any of these reasons can make us reluctant to take the initiative in bringing hurt out into the open. But whether it's big wrongs or small wrongs, when our partner has hurt us by being thoughtless or selfish or cold or unfaithful, the hurt needs to be addressed.
And just as small stones eventually block a drain, so the accumulation of small hurts, if left unaddressed, can break a marriage. We want to give you an example from our own marriage that is relatively trivial on the scale of things, and certainly we have had to address much more serious hurt between us over the years. But we're using this one to show the effect of bringing things out into the open rather than allowing them to stay buried.
Before we tell the story, first, a little bit of background. One of the differences between Scilla and me is that when we go out to see friends and it's time to go home, we have very different ways of leaving. My way is to say thank you and goodbye and then to leave.
And my way is to start saying goodbye and then to begin to have probably my best, most in-depth conversation of the whole evening.
And I've discovered over many years of marriage that if we're to get home when we plan to, we need to start leaving about halfway through the first course of the meal.
And one time we were at a friend's birthday party. It was in South London and it was a Thursday evening. It was about a 15-minute drive from our home. And Nicky told me on the way there that the following day was particularly busy for him, so he wanted to get a good night's sleep. So we agreed that we'd make sure we were home by midnight.
Well, knowing what Scilla's like, I decided to double the time it would take us to get home. So I initiated the process of leaving at 11:30 p.m. I said goodbye, and I told Scilla I was just going to get the car that we'd parked at the other end of the road. Well, I drove up to the house and double-parked outside in this narrow and crowded London street and waited for Scilla to come out. 20 minutes passed. Midnight came, midnight went. There was no sign of Scilla. So I reparked the car, not an easy manoeuvre, went back into the house and found Scilla exactly where I'd left her, still deep in conversation. Well, keeping a thick smile on my face so as not to spoil the end of the party, I said to her, I've been waiting in the car, and it's now past midnight. At which point, Scilla looked round at me and said, I didn't even realize you'd left, which rather added insult to injury. So I told her I was going to get the car again, and quite soon, 10 minutes at the most, Scilla joined me. And as we were driving home, she was in great form, chatting away happily about what a fun evening it had been. Meanwhile, I was fuming inside. I was trying to cope not only with my frustration that we were going to get home a lot later than we'd agreed, but also feeling very hurt that Scilla had totally ignored my need for a good night's sleep. As a typical hedgehog, I was trying to work out whether or not to say anything. And I can remember the exact place on the way home when I decided it really wasn't healthy to pretend any longer that everything was okay.
And Nikki suddenly said to me, "Did you realise I was waiting in the car for you for more than 20 minutes?" Well, that really got my attention, and I asked him, "Are you feeling upset with me?" He then told me that he was very cross and rather hurt, that we'd made an agreement which I had totally ignored. Now, when I heard Nikki describe how it felt for him, which he doesn't do all that often, I realised I had been really thoughtless. And so, despite my strong temptation to make excuses, I knew the best thing I could do was to apologise.
And straight away, Scylla said to me, "I'm so sorry for making us so late. Please forgive me." Well, as soon as it was out in the open, I didn't find it difficult to forgive, and my feelings of annoyance and hurt evaporated much more quickly than they built up.
So we spent the rest of the journey home discussing how we could communicate more effectively in a crowd about when it's time to leave.
I think I knew the situation would happen again. Indeed, it has happened several times since then. But getting those feelings out into the open, describing to Scylla how I felt, meant there were no negative emotions left inside. The hurt and anger were dealt with.
And most of us hate confrontation. But we need to be able to tell our husband or wife when they've hurt us.